The racial abuse that Raheem Sterling received on Saturday has led to a huge debate in the world of football and mainstream media as well. For the sort of first time, I think people are really starting to see what's going on here and how we maybe need to move forward and how we've actually let ourselves down as a football community over the last 20, 30, well, from the start of time really, when it comes to the dealings with black players, with ethnic minorities. He seems to have consistently got very unfair press, and he has now spoken out himself in Instagram posts that has led to a debate, as I say, in the wider world and wider community, certainly in the UK. Musa Okwonga is with me now. I'm really pleased that you're chatting to us about this one, Musa, because unlike a lot of people who have jumped on this issue and spoken about this debate, the debate of racism in football in particular, what I love about what you've done with the articles that you've written on your blog, okwonga.com, and in the podcast, the Rabona podcast, is that you've said that I want to take a second and watch this unfold. You saw that Raheem Sterling made those Instagram posts and then, you know, as I say, it started this whole conversation, but you haven't really jumped in on it until a few days later down the line. What were your reasons for waiting to sort of say your piece on this?
I think that, and thank you so much, first of all, for having me on, James. I really appreciate the opportunity. I think first of all, you know, I like to compare it to when you first buy an album, right? So when you buy, like, you know, Kendrick Lamar's Damn, you don't review it in the first 2 hours. You sit with it and you absorb it and you see how things are playing out. You see how the dynamics of the album are playing out. I think the same as with these controversies when they break out. What's most interesting is not the immediate response, but the considered conversations. And you don't really get those considered conversations until a few hours after, a couple of days after. And the same with listening to new music. You need to sort of sit back and assess how it's working, because it could just be, is this just another moment where it's headlines and nothing more? So I thought I'd sit back not only to see how people treated the controversy, but specifically how particular journalists addressed the issue, whether they were going to be like, okay, let's look at ourselves, our community, let's look at how we cover black players in future, or are we just going to write articles which say, well, yeah, it's awful, but that's not me. You know, it's a bit like when guys go, oh, I don't assault women, therefore I must be a good guy. Well, do you ever intervene? Do you ever call out people who are doing this stuff? Do you ever call out your mates who are groping someone at the bar? Do you know what I mean? So it's not just enough to say I'm a good person because you don't participate actively. Is your silence enabling that? And that's why I sat back for a couple of days really, just to see who was going to speak up and how they were going to speak up. And only then did I say, okay, look, now I'm going to step in and say something.
On you as a journalist, because I like that considered approach. I think a lot of people appreciate that considered approach, but the world of press has changed a hell of a lot in the last 5 years, certainly the last 10 years. And with social media, the platform for a freelance writer there's an opportunity there as much as there is for those bigger platforms. And now that everyone's got a platform, you're seeing a lot more different opinions. And what I would say, for someone who's totally immersed in new media, is that I think most people that are within this bubble look at mainstream media, look at The Sun, look at those tabloid newspapers, and are beyond disappointed in how they consistently behave. And I think a lot of people have spotted that for a long time and moved away from looking at those kind of outlets. I know you wrote a great article on The Guardian, and I think that obviously fits the kind of writing and the thought process that you're going through as a journalist. But as a journalist first, how do you feel about the press? How do you feel about that element of the press? Do you understand that it's just part of it, or are you disappointed in it? What are your feelings towards it?
I feel like, to be honest, the reason a lot of the press, traditional press like that, like The Sun, the Mail, are panicking now is because the backlash is quite severe against the study thing. It is sustained. And this has been their business model for a long time. You know, bash the working class white guy, because it is about class as well, let's be honest. Bash the working class white guy. That was what David Beckham got. Let's bash the working class black guy. Those things are meat and drink to a lot of their readers. A lot of their readers absolutely love that. A lot of their readers thrive off envy and thrive off jealousy. Let's not make two bones about that. That's, you know, that can be the reader, the middle class reader in wherever, or the working class reader that envies what the black person has, in that context, in that specific context, right?
Is there an element of like chicken and egg there though? Like, isn't the responsibility on the newspaper?
I think I do think it is, and that's why I could never work for those publications. I also think that they feed into resentment. So what might be a temporary resentment? Let's say that you're like, two working class people, and a black guy's got something that you haven't. You might feel a temporary, oh man, why has that guy got something I haven't? Because he was brought over from Guinea. And then, he's been brought over from Guinea. Why has that guy got what I don't have? And I'm a working class guy who's lived here for years, a white guy who's lived here for years. And that could be a temporary resentment. And then a couple of hours later, you see him down the supermarket. Hey mate, how's it going? And you realize, we're all in this shit together, and you move on. But what the Sun and the Mail are so good at is capturing that temporary resentment, that thing you might feel, the fleeting moment, and spinning it out. They're very good at grabbing in your moment of rage, because we all have that frustration, you could be in the car, you could be swearing at someone, you could have a bad job done in your house, and you're just like, in that moment of anger or ignorance, whatever you call it, bigotry.
Yeah, we make mistakes,
Yeah, we make those mistakes, but what the Sun and the Mail are so good at doing is grabbing you right there and spinning that out. And that, to me, is the toxic. That is the toxic part of what they bring to this
so
conversation.
Does that offer up an excuse? Because what I've seen is, I've seen some people talking about, I think it might have been the author of the article, he's suggesting that the comment, the headline that was put towards, say, Raheem Sterling buying his mum a sink or whatever it was, whatever outrageous headline it was, that was based around the resentment of an article that had come out that was talking about the amount of money that young footballers were making. Are there any excuses for these kind of headlines? You're saying that there's an element of, they're tapping into that quick-fire resentment.
Well, exactly. This is my point. Exactly, because resentment, when you feel resentment and you're ignorant, what should follow that immediately in that moment is shame. Oh my goodness, how ignorant of me. And then you move on. So to then take resentment and to go and to write it up and publish it, it then becomes something more sinister. It then becomes something far more grim, and that's inexcusable. That makes it, to be honest, that makes it even more inexcusable. Because if, let's say I offend you, right? Let's say I say something offensive to you. If I'm a decent person and I see that you're hurt, my immediate response should be, my God, James, I'm so sorry. For me to see you're hurt and then to continue to poke the area where you've been hurt, where you've been offended, that is, to me, extremely grim. And that is what the Mail and the Sun do so effectively. And now they're feeling threatened because new media like yourselves are coming in and critiquing them 24 hours, and they didn't have that pushback before. That's why they're worried. Yeah,
and I think what's exciting, and you spoke about this as well in the article on your blog, was the platform that certain people have now, as much as the channel that they're on. So, for example, let's look at two sides of this coin. First side, let's look at the positive one first. Gary Neville on Monday Night Football, of course, that's on Sky. That we know about Rupert Murdoch, we know about all of that stuff that goes on. But actually, what we're really looking forward to is hearing what he has to say on this. And so he had a real opportunity there to say something meaningful, and he did, didn't he?
He did. I think it was incredibly powerful watching that. If you watch the segment, if you haven't already, anyone watching this, it's a 14-minute segment, I think. And Jamie Carragher and Gary Neville talk about Raheem Sterling and what he experienced in the England camp and at Liverpool on his way out the door to Manchester City. And there's a moment, if you watch the segment, you can actually see the moment in Gary Neville's eyes when he's feeling regret at not having stepped in sooner, had this conversation sooner. He says, actually, we avoid this on the show. So there have been conscious choices to steer clear of this issue. And you think to yourself, my goodness, if Gary Neville, outspoken, forthright, says that like he sees, Gary Neville is frightened or concerned about speaking up until now, then what backlash is he afraid of? Do you know what I mean? Like what tribalism is he afraid of? Because even, and I talked about this as well, like, I'm so glad that Gary Neville and Jamie Carragher spoke out, but part of me was like, it was like watching a couple of parents embarrassed, they finally acknowledge their kid's been bullied at school. Do you know what I mean? Like, every day the kid comes home with bruises and finally they're like, Dad, like, this is unbearable.
Yeah.
And there's that bit when Raheem Sterling talks to Gary Neville about, during the England camp about, this is awful. And you see Gary Neville's face going, my goodness, I should have. You can see it. You can see the regret, can't you?
Yeah, I totally identify with that moment with Gary Neville as, as a middle-class white guy. I've had that moment myself where I've gone, my wife, her heritage is Vietnamese, and
Yeah.
From spending the last 8 years of my life with this woman that I love so much and seeing her perception of life and the things that she's had to go through, there is that moment. And I don't think that anyone watching this or reading about this should be ashamed of that moment. And I was so pleased that you could see the moment happening with Gary Neville, that he's gone, shit, how have I been looking at this world? I've not been understanding how that subconscious racism is, and that's not his fault that that's been kind of put upon him. But I think those are the sort of shoots of hope with this whole saga. That there's someone as high profile as that seeing this.
A decent person, exactly. And, you've seen it with your wife, and you talked about shoots of hope there, and that's how I feel as well. Because I think that anybody who feels empathy for what Raheem Sterling is going through, any decent person who sees that will feel, my goodness, this is awful. I never got it before, but no worries about that now. The most important thing is, what do I learn from now on? Because Gary Neville might now be going back and thinking, I played with Andy Cole and Dwight York. And, everyone always said that Dwight York, and everyone always said that like Andy Cole was the sulky one and Dwight York was the happy one. Well, look, like Dwight York he grew up in a different context, and Andy Cole grew up in the UK, like in a whole different backdrop. And everyone always said Andy Cole was the sulky guy. But what if Andy Cole was just like going through it? Do you know what I mean? Like, what was
just a bit quieter?
Yeah. But there was always this thing of how it had to be. There was always this sort of demonization of black players who didn't behave in a certain way. And if you look back, it's like, wow, I just wonder what conversations Gary Neville's going to have now with black friends of his who are like, finally, Gary, finally you get it. Finally you're saying it. Yeah.
No, I think it's something that sometimes you don't see it till you see it. And that's a huge shame. And I've seen quotes where one of the, I won't even say his name, but the guy who's come out and said that, look, he's really sorry. It's the guy with the Chelsea fan he's lost his job, he's lost his season ticket. And what I found incredible was in his quote. Well, first of all, he was audacious enough to say that he wasn't even saying the racial slur that he said. He was saying mank, C-U-N-T. The second thing I found hilarious was that he said, look, I've lost all this stuff. All this stuff has happened to me. Can't everyone just leave me alone? And I was like, and he's still not. Look, he's apologising, but through gritted teeth, and he's got the audacity to say, leave me alone, when this whole thing has become such an issue because people just won't. Raheem Sterling just wants people just to leave him alone and talk to him on the content of his character.
Now you know how this is. You've put that perfectly. Like, now you know how Raheem Sterling feels, and Raheem Sterling. This guy, I'm sure this guy, ironically enough, this guy probably feels unfairly targeted. I think it's good actually you didn't mention his name. I know, it's what?
This is hilarious.
Having said that, I think it's good you didn't mention his name, because sometimes it's easy to give people one name to hang on to. And it's why I thought very long and hard about naming names in the Guardian pieces I did, because I don't normally name that many names in my articles, because I like my critiques to be about systems. I just feel in particular cases, if you talk about racism being enabled in football through ignorance, through bigotry, through flippancy, through people saying, oh, that's not a problem, then if you don't name people making those choices, then you never get to solving it. It's like being a doctor and not diagnosing it. Oh, I've got an ache, doctor. Yeah, you've got an ache, but not saying what part of the body it's on. And I think what's really important we need to understand with racism, what allows racism to thrive, it's not just doing the racism, it's looking the other way. So you don't just get really bad tooth decay from eating lots of sweets. You also get it from not brushing. And there's a lot of people who are doing the equivalent of not brushing when it comes to racism. They're looking away. So, for example, you look at your wife. When your wife says this is an issue, and people in her workplace, wherever, go, oh no, that's not an issue, they're contributing. Yeah. And then because I think it's always important. I mean, I first had a breakthrough with my friends about racism when I said I experienced something. They're like, no, that can't be the case, Musa. Yeah. And I said, wait a minute. Let's say you're my rate. I said, James, do you remember that time you had a really bad experience with your boss and your boss was being awful to you? Said, yeah. And it was really bad. Yeah. I said, James, do you know what? I took your word for that. And I believed you. How come you don't take my word for this? What is it that is stopping you taking my word for it? And when I have that conversation with my friends, it blows their minds like, oh my God, I don't trust you because at some level, I've been brought up not to believe black people when they talk about race, women when they talk about sexism. Do you know what I mean? But if that's your mate, you believe your mate. Do you know what I mean? In the
totally.
It's
It's a fascinating subject because you're almost, and I had the exact same moment. You have this moment where you're bizarrely your body, your state of mind is goes into this defensive mode. Well, it's not. There's
weird.
no need for you to be defensive. The bottom line is that person felt that way, and I can't take the feelings from her or him. As soon as that person feels that way, then it is a legitimate thing that you need to discuss and talk about. And then you might get to a point where maybe that person was being slightly sensitive. But the problem is with this subconscious racism that has sort of got into all of our minds is that why am I going that way first instead of going instead of being the other side of it? You know?
Yeah, exactly. It's like, and I think that speaks for any situation. Like, let's say I have a situation where I overreact and like, oh my God, that's a bit much. But we have to, you're right, we have to deconstruct it. We can't just dismiss it, first of all. Because actually, in most cases, as your wife will tell you, or, as any black person will tell you, the cases that we talk about actually can be a minority of the cases we experience. Because if you went nuts over all of them, you go mad. I mean, look at a white guy's perspective. Let's say you're a tall white guy in an urban area. Let's say in East Croydon on a if the Black Sheep Bar is still there, I don't know, or the Treehouse, wherever, if the Treehouse is still there. You're at the Treehouse and it's 6 p.m. on a Friday evening and you're just a bit too tall and that guy wants to start on you, right? If you're a guy that looks a certain way, there are so many dudes like that who will try it on with you. You basically you end up just ignoring them, because if you responded to every single one of them, you'd never get back to your front door.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? So it's just about when black people, when women talk about this stuff, I think the important thing is to think to yourself, primarily, maybe there's something in this. Maybe, I think they're overreacting, maybe instinctively, but let's first break it down, because maybe it's the tip of the iceberg.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And the last thing I want to talk about again is with this subconscious racism. Nedum Manua has come out, and I'm a QPR fan, so I know Nedum Manua is generally strange. Well, from what I've seen of him as a QPR captain and his interviews and stuff, he has quite a blunt way about the way that he talks and can be a little bit pessimistic. But when he was talking about this issue, he was saying that, look, this is going to go on for a long, long time, and also that he kind of gave the impression that he can't see much changing. Now, that disappoints me a little bit as someone who likes to be a bit optimistic. I just wanted to kind of see where do you see all of this going? Because, and the other thing I thought Anua said, which was definitely a valid point, was that often this happens, and in this online world where it's about clicks, the topic of racism is a topic that is interesting to people, and so something like this happens, and we do talk about it, but it then seems to subside again, and people aren't talking about it frequently enough. And it's just a plaster that's put over the top of it. How do we move this forward? So, look, I think it's naive to think that something like this won't happen again, because it's on it can be on a person by person basis. But how do we get to a point in 15 years' time where this isn't something that we have to talk about, that we're all a lot more smarter?
I think this is where new media has a huge opportunity, and I think that's also why you're more optimistic than he is, because he knows. Like, look at who his paymasters are, or look which structures he inhabits. He's, part of the Football League structure, and so he's had so many meetings with people above him in that kind of corporate pecking order, because it is a corporate structure, like the Football League, who have these attitudes. He's had those dirty looks. He's heard stories from countless friends. His WhatsApp group is already full of people going, "Oh, they're on the racism thing. They don't really care." The beauty of new media is that you have bosses that are generally more progressive. You yourself are building a career on a platform that's independently structured, so you can hold people to account. You become another form of the journalistic arm. And then you can also empower your listeners, who are also football fans, to hold people accountable, even on a small level. For example, you might have people watching today who feel empowered to go after this and report someone to a steward they wouldn't report before. There could be someone at local ground, wherever people go and watch your show, whether it could be an Orient fan, a Crewe Alexandra fan, whatever. You might have someone making racial abuse at a certain game. You might have reported them last week. You report them now. And this all has a massive massive ripple effect, because what it then begins to do is it holds fans accountable, but then also you can hold players accountable. For example, like I'm a Manchester United fan. One of our players made homophobic comment to a player a few years ago at a corner. I won't name the player because I don't want to get sued, because, but
who does?
That's, well, yeah, exactly. But my point being, if we react like this to everything, if we don't get exhausted by the struggle, if we keep holding people to account at the board level, at the club level, we're going to keep these conversations going, and they will trickle into something. Like, it's about chipping away. And to be honest, like, Nedum Onuoha, don't get me wrong, I completely respect his point of view. I also would say that we are further ahead than we were 40 years ago, just because people have kept having conversations like this and they've kept being optimistic. I think it's good that he's pessimistic, because it's good for us to be like, my goodness, a professional player who's given up on this issue, what must he have gone through? Yeah. And that shows us the scale of the problem. But our job, and I think your job as well, the job of your listeners, your viewers who are obviously tuning in, I appreciate their audience, is to keep having these conversations in the hard places, at the dinner tables, in the bars, in the nightclubs, wherever we hear it.
Absolutely. Well, I think that's a perfect place to maybe leave it today, mate. But absolute joy to have you on the Bull Street channel. And where can people find you? I know, but you tell them.
Yeah, sure. So thank you so much, first of all, for watching, for listening. You can find me at Okwonga on Twitter. It's OKWONGA. My website is my surname as well, .com, OKWONGA.com. And yeah, if you enjoy what I've said, if you find it interesting, I write poetry, I write about football, I write about politics, I make electronic music. So hopefully...
something for everyone, surely.
Yeah, hopefully.
Absolutely.
Apart from my exes, unfortunately.
Yeah, check. As I said, 2 cracking articles, one in The Guardian and one, as I say, on Moose's blog, okwonga.com. So go and check both of them out. If you've enjoyed this video, then why not hit that like button? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Subscribe to Bull Street, and we'll see you soon.
Cheers.